would sit. Lechanus, where did the Sanhedrin go to Galus? In stages of Galus, that was at the time hope would become agony. And as we said, Uchenegdin, corresponding to the 10 stages of Galus that the Shechina went through, Galus the Sanhedrin also went through 10 stages of Galus. That was at the times of the second Beis HaMikdash. In the Gemara, we know that from tradition. So where did the Sanhedrin go to Galus? First of all, they went from Lishkas HaGazuz. From Lishkas HaGazuz, that's the main place where they would sit. Lechanus, they went to the stores. Now these stores were in Har HaBayis, and why is it that they moved? So we know that a Bezin of 23 can judge Din and Nefashas only if the main Sanhedrin is in its place in Lishkas HaGazuz. But near the end of the second Beis HaMikdash, murder was so rampant that the courts were overwhelmed with cases and simply couldn't judge them all. Therefore, the Sanhedrin relocated to the stores in Har HaBayis to ease the burden of the other courts, so they didn't have to judge Din and Nefashas. And then from there, Umechanus Yerushalayim, they went to Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim Liyavne, then they went to Yavne. Lamed Alpha is on top. Then Yavne Leusha, then Usha Liyavne, Yavne back to Usha, and then Usha Lishvaram, Shvaram Lebeis Sha'arim, Beis Sha'arim Letzipar, Mitzipar Letiverio. And the reason why they went through all these journeys is because wherever the Rosh Bezdin was, that's usually where they would move the Sanhedrin. And Utiveria Mukum Mikulan, Tiveria was the lowest one, meaning it was in the lowest state of affairs. Shenemar says in the pasuk, B'shafalt me'eretz tzaberi, and you're going to sink down and you're going to speak from the ground. Rabbi Eliezer, he argues, he says it's not considered 10 different stages of Galus, it's really Sheish Galias, 6 different stages. Shenemar says in the pasuk, Ki heishach yoshvei maraim, for he brought down all those that dwell on high, Kiryan Isgava in the exalted city. Yashpilena, he lowered it. Yashpila ad aretz, he lowered it to the ground. Yagyena ad afar, he brought it to the dust. And this talks about 6 different lowerings. And Rabbi Yechon, he says, Umishama sidin legal, but from there, that's where they're going to be redeemed. Shenemar says in the pasuk, Hisnari me offer kumi shavi. And the Mishnah continues with another takana Rabbi Yechon and Zakai. Amar Bishua ben Karcha. Va'odzos his kana Rabbi Yechon and Zakai. Rabbi Yechon Zakai was metakin sha'afilu Rosh Bezin b'chol makom. Even if the Rosh Bezin is somewhere else, shalayu edim ha'chem el makam avad. The edim that are coming to give edus on Kiddush HaChodesh, they do not have to go after the Rosh Bezin. They just go to the makam avad where the Bezin usually sits. Even though the Rosh Bezin is the one that says Mekudesh, and you might think that you would have to go follow him if he's not in Bezin, so they just go right to Bezin, and Bezin will say Mekudesh without the Rosh Bezin. And now we have a story about this. Hahi etzadaz menul ledina kameda meimar. There was a woman that was subpoenaed. She had to come to Din Torah by a meimar. That's because she owed someone money. Ben Ardai, and this was located in Arda. Azla meimar lemechuza. But then a meimar picked up and he went to Mechuza. V'loy azla basrei. She didn't go after him to Mechuza. Kasab psichi lava. So he wrote a cherim against her because she didn't come to Bezdin. Armal Ravashi la meimar. Ravashi asked the meimar. V'anatanan. We learned in our Mishnah. Afilu Rosh Bezdin b'chol makom shloyu edim halchin el makom avad. Even though the Rosh Bezdin is somewhere else, the edim only have to go to where the vad is, where the Bezdin itself is, but not where the Rosh Bezdin is. And you picked up and you went to Mechuza. Why does she have to follow you there? Amar Leh, he responded, Hani milin edus hachodesh. That's regarding edus for Kiddush HaChodesh. The im came because if you're going to make the edim follow the Rosh Bezdin, nimtes machshin lasid lava, you're going to cause them to stumble in the future. If they have to schlep all around town trying to find the Rosh Bezdin, they're just going to say next time that they're not even going to bother coming. Aval hacha, but over here, Evid Level Ishmalva, someone that borrowed money is considered an Evid, a slave to the one that lent him the money, and since she owes money, so she has to go follow the Rosh Bezdin around wherever he is so that we can have the case judged. And Tana Rabbanan, we have another takana from B'rechem and Zakai, Ein Kahanim Rishayim Laos B'Sandalem L'Duchen. The Kahanim, when they go up to Duchen, they're not allowed to wear their shoes. B'Zu Echem Mitesh Takana Sheiskin B'rechem and Zakai, and this is one of the 9 takanas that B'rechem and Zakai made. Shista Hai Pirka, 6 in this parak, V'Chad the Pirka Kama, 1 that we learned about in the previous parak, and V'Idach, the 8th thing that he was Masakin was the time you have a brisa. Gershon is gar b'zman hazeh. If we have a ger nowadays after the destruction of Beis HaMikdash, Tzarich sheyafar z'rev l'kina, he has to separate a certain amount of money for his ken, for his bird pair that he would bring as a carbon if we had the Beis HaMikdash. When we entered into a bris with Hashem by Har Sinai, all the males got a bris, immersed in the mikvah, brought a carbon, and had the blood sprinkled on them. And the Gemara increases teaches that a ger needs the same steps. After the Churban Bayis, since a carbon couldn't be brought, gerim would still designate money for their carbon, so that when the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt, they'll be able to bring that carbon. And Amar Shimon Elazar, he says, Karnim Nalei Rabbi Yechon already voted on this ubitla, and he was mevatel this mipnei hatakala because we're going to run into mishap. If we have this hektish money floating around, they might end up using it to buy a candy bar, and that's a problem. And V'idach, the 9th takana is plugged to Rav Papa, Rav Nachman Yitzchak. It's machlokes between Rav Papa and Rav Nachman Yitzchak. Rav Papa Amar, he says Karam Ravai had to do with Karam Ravai. When we have a brand new tree, the first 3 years of its fruits are arla, you're not allowed to eat them. And Karam Ravai, the 4th year's fruits, you have to bring up to Yerushalayim. Rav Nachman Yitzchak Amar, he says Lashon Shel Zahiris, it had to do with the scarlet thread that's tied around the goat that's thrown off the cliff on Yom Kippur. Rav Papa Amar, he says Karam Ravai, what exactly was that kana? Did not we have a Mishnah? Karam Ravai hayal Yerushalayim halach l'chol tzad. Karam Ravai, these 4th year fruits, they have to be brought up to Yerushalayim if you're within a day's journey of Yerushalayim. And v'zuhi tchuma, this is the boundary. Elas min adarim v'hakravas min atzafain lod min amayr v'yarden min hamizrach and v'amar ula v'yitema. Some say it was Rabbi bar Ula Amar Rabbi Yochanan matam. Why is it that you have to bring these fruits up to Yerushalayim if you're within a day's journey? Kedei la'azer Yerushalayim pairs. That's what the marketplace of Yerushalayim could be adorned with lots of fruit. And the time you have a brisa, Karam Ravai hayulay the Rabbi Lezer mezrach lod b'tzad Kfar Tavi. Rabbi Lezer had some Karam Ravai in the east of Lod. It was near Kfar Tavi. And Rabbi Lezer lafkir la'aniyim. He wanted to be mafkir it. He wanted to give it to the poor people. He didn't have the kaich. He didn't have the ability to bring it to Yerushalayim, but he technically had to because he was within a day's journey. And Amrulay Talmidav, his Talmidim told him, Rabbi, Kfar Nimnu Chavirecha Olav, your friends already voted on this, V'tiru, and they already permitted it because after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, you do not have to bring this up to Yerushalayim because there's no reason to adorn the Shukkim of Yerushalayim Yerushalayim with fruits because everything's been destroyed anyway. And Man Cheverecha, who are they referring to when they said your friends? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So we say Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was Masaki in this takana. And Rabbi Yitzchak Amar, he says Lashon Shal Zaharis had to do with this red thread. The time you have a brisa. Barishayna originally, Hayu Kashan Lashon Shal Zaharis al Pesach Ulam Bachutz. They would take a red thread and they would tie it to the entrance of the ulam outside, and everyone was able to see it. Hilbin, if it turned white, Hayu Smechin, everyone would be happy. Loy Hilbin, if it didn't turn white, if it stayed red, Hayu Atzevin, everyone would be sad. Hiskinu Shu Kashan Oisa al Pesach Ulam Bifnim. So then they made a takana. They should tie it at the entrance to the ulam, but on the inside, so no one could see it. Vadayin Hayu Mitzitz and Vroin. However, everyone would peek inside and they would see. Hilbin, if it turned white, Hayu Smechin, they'd be happy. Loy Hilbin, if it didn't turn white, Hayu Atzevin, they'd be sad. So then Hiskinu, they were just misakin Shu Kashan Oisa Chatzi Veselav Chatzi Ben Karnav Shal Ser HaMishtalech. Half of it was tied in a rock out in the midbar, and half of it was tied around the horns of the Sar Mishtalech. So here we have this takana. And now we ask Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, my time Rav Papa, why does Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak say Rav Papa? So Rav Lachai, he'll tell you, Isak Datach Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. If you want to say it's Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that made that takana, Chaver of Rabbi Eliezer Mihava, was he the colleague of Rabbi Eliezer? Rabbi Yahava, he was the Rebbe of Rabbi Eliezer. So it can't be that when they said your friends made this takana, they were referring to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai wasn't Rabbi Eliezer's friend, he was his Rebbe. And Rav Papa would answer, Kim Talmidim Havu, since it was his Talmidim speaking to him, it was Rabbi Eliezer's Talmidim telling him this. It's not proper to tell your Rebbe that his Rebbe said something, even though Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was his Rebbe. But since they were addressing their Rebbe, it's improper to tell him, well, your Rebbe says this. Now, Rav Papa, my time Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, why does Rav Papa say Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak? He'll tell you, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. If you want to say there's Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that made the takana, they made Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai me have a lashon shal zahiris malbin, and it is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Would this red thread actually ever turn white? Vatani, we have a brayso. Kol shnei of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai may have esrim shana. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived for 120 years. Mem shana asik b'pragmatia. The first 40 years he was a businessman. Mem shana lamad. The next 40 years he learned Torah. Mem shana limei. The next 40 years he taught, meaning he was a Rosh Bezdin. And Vatani, we have a brayso. Mem shana kaim shenechav abayis. 40 years before the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, loy hay lashon shal zahiris malbin. That red thread never turned white. Elamadim, it would stay red. And Utanan, we have another Mishnah, Mishachav Rabbi, when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was mistake and so and so. So we know that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived right before and right after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So it can't be that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the one that made this takana. When he was the Rosh Bezdin and had the ability to make this takana, the thread never turned white anyway, so there's no reason for this takana. And for either Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, he would answer, that 40 years that he learned, and he wasn't the Rosh Bezdin, and that was a possible time that the takana would come into play, that it would sometimes turn white, sometimes not turn white. Talmud Yoshel Fnei Rabbi Hava. He was a Talmud that was sitting in front of his Rebbe, meaning he was one of the most chashuv Talmidim, and he got one of the front row seats. The Amar Milsa, and he said something, he said a svara, V'staber Tameh, and it was very logical, his Rebbe liked it, Lamed Beis Amud Aleph on the top of a Kavi Rabbi B'Shmei, and therefore his Rebbe established it in his name. So really it was his Rebbe that made this takana of the Lashon Shal Zahiris, but since it was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's suggestion, his svara, so therefore they said he was the one that was masakin it, even though it was really his Rebbe that was masakin it. We're going to stop here for the day, pick up tomorrow discussing the order of the brachas of Shemona Esrei of Rosh Hashanah. For now, everyone should have a wonderful day.